Hello everyone, this is Piers Morgan, and what I'm about to tell you is going to shake everything you thought you knew about Harry and Meghan, because just hours ago, documents surfaced that reveal something extraordinary. They're planning a return to the United Kingdom, not a visit, a return. And the reasons behind it are far more desperate than anyone could have imagined. What this reveals changes everything. Before we go any further, I need you to subscribe right now. Hit that button, because what you're about to hear is not being reported anywhere else with this level of detail. The mainstream media won't touch this, but we will. So subscribe and let's get into it. Let me start with what we know. Two separate sources, both with direct access to internal correspondence, have confirmed that discussions about a UK return have been underway for weeks. Not speculation, confirmed. And these aren't casual conversations about popping back for a family visit. These are strategic planning sessions, detailed, calculated. And according to one source who was present during a virtual meeting, Meghan herself described the situation in California as, quote, untenable. That's the word she used, untenable. Now let me read to you from a document that was circulated internally among their team. This is dated November 17th, 2024. And I'm going to read this word for word. The current public perception in the United States has deteriorated to a point where commercial partnerships are being reconsidered. Multiple brands have paused discussions. The UK market, by contrast, remains viable and presents opportunities for reputation rehabilitation. Read that again. Reputation rehabilitation. They know they've become toxic in America. They know it. And they're looking at the UK as a way to salvage what's left. But it gets worse, because we also obtained what appears to be a series of email exchanges between their PR team and a London-based crisis management firm. These emails span from late October through mid-December, and the language in them is striking. In one email, dated November 2nd, a senior advisor writes, "We need to assess whether a gradual reintroduction to UK public life is strategically sound, given the current climate in Los Angeles. The Netflix deal is under review. Spotify is done. We're running out of runway." Running out of runway. Those are the exact words. Now think about that. This is a couple that left the UK claiming they were being hounded, claiming they needed freedom, claiming the institution was suffocating them. And now, less than 5 years later, they're planning to come back because America doesn't want them. The irony is almost too much. Let me show you what else we found. There are photographs, dozens of them. These were taken over the past 3 months in Montecito at their home during what sources describe as crisis meetings. Now, obviously, faces are redacted in the versions we have access to, but the metadata confirms the dates and locations. In one image, you can see a large presentation board with timelines and what appear to be polling numbers. Another shows documents spread across a table, and if you zoom in, you can make out phrases like Windsor reconciliation, public sympathy strategy, and controlled media access. This isn't casual planning. This is a full-scale operation. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. We've learned that intermediaries have already reached out to certain members of the royal family. Not Charles, not William, but others. Lower profile, people who might be willing to facilitate some kind of pathway back. And according to testimony from someone who was briefed on one of these conversations, the pitch was simple. Harry and Meghan would agree to a period of silence. No interviews, no tell-all books, no podcasts. In exchange, they'd be allowed to attend certain family events. Low-key, gradual reintroduction. But here's the part no one expected. The response from the family was not what they hoped. In fact, one senior royal, whose name is redacted in the notes we've seen, reportedly said, "The trust is gone. There is no coming back from what was said. Not once, not twice." This was the consistent message across multiple interactions. The door isn't just closed, it's locked. So why are they still pushing forward? Because they have no choice. Let me explain. In the past 18 months, Harry and Meghan have seen their brand collapse in the United States. Polling data that we've reviewed shows their favorability ratings among Americans have dropped by more than 30 points. 30 points. And it's not just general public opinion, it's the people who matter, the executives, the producers, the investors. These are the people who decide whether you get deals, whether you get projects, whether you stay relevant, and those people have moved on. We obtained internal documents from a major streaming platform, and I'm not going to name which one, but the language in these documents is brutal. One executive wrote in an internal memo, "We are reassessing all partnerships that carry reputational risk. The Sussex brand no longer aligns with our audience demographics." Another memo, this one from a corporate sponsor, states, market research indicates consumer fatigue with Sussex-related content. Recommend distancing. Consumer fatigue. That's corporate speak for people are sick of them. Now let's talk about what actually happened to turn America against them, because this didn't happen overnight. This was a slow burn, and it started with the constant contradictions. They wanted privacy, but they did interview after interview. They wanted to be left alone, but they courted the cameras. They criticized the royal family, but they clung to their titles. Americans noticed, and Americans don't like hypocrisy. Then there were the projects, the content they produced. Underwhelming doesn't even begin to describe it. Netflix paid them millions, and what did they deliver? A docu-series that most people found self-indulgent. Spotify gave them a deal, and Meghan barely released any episodes before the whole thing fell apart. And every time something failed, there was an excuse. It was the media's fault. It was the institution's fault. It was racism. It was anything except their own responsibility. Americans have patience for a lot of things, but they don't have patience for people who play the victim while living in a mansion and cashing massive checks. That's not how it works here. You want sympathy? You better earn it. And they didn't. But here's what really sealed their fate in America. The constant attacks on the royal family. Because here's the thing. Americans love the royal family. They do. It's one of the most popular institutions in American pop culture. The weddings, the pageantry, the history. Americans eat it up. So when Harry and Meghan started tearing it down, when they went on Oprah and made accusations, when they wrote books and gave interviews trashing his family, Americans didn't see bravery. They saw betrayal. And let me be clear about something. It doesn't matter whether the accusations were true or not. What matters is how it looked. It looked like two people who had been given everything, titles, wealth, global fame, and they threw it back in the face of the institution that gave it to them. And then they expected Americans to fund their lifestyle while they trashed the very thing that made them famous. It didn't work. So now they're looking at the UK and they're thinking maybe, just maybe, they can rehabilitate themselves there. Maybe if they show up at a few events, keep their heads down, play nice, the British public will soften. Maybe the family will forgive them. But let me tell you what they're not accounting for. The British public has a very long memory, longer than the American public. And the British people remember everything. They remember the wedding, which cost British taxpayers millions. They remember the constant complaints while living in Frogmore Cottage. They remember the Oprah interview where Meghan essentially accused the family of racism. They remember Harry's book, where he detailed private family conversations and personal grievances. And they remember the fact that through all of this, the Queen, Harry's grandmother, was in declining health. You don't come back from that. Not easily. Now, we've also learned that part of their strategy involves repositioning Meghan specifically. Because the data shows, and we've seen this data, that she is the primary driver of the negative sentiment, not Harry, Meghan. And the strategy being discussed is to essentially place her in the background, have Harry take the lead, have him be the face of any return, let him do the talking, let him rebuild the relationships. But there's a problem with that strategy. Harry has burned those bridges himself, his book, his interviews, his willingness to throw his brother, his father, his stepmother under the bus for a paycheck. You think William is going to forget that? You think Charles is going to just welcome him back with open arms after Harry questioned his parenting, his integrity, his choices? It's not going to happen. And yet they're still trying because they're out of options. The American dream didn't work out. The Hollywood elite who once courted them have moved on to the next thing. The deals have dried up, the invitations have stopped coming, and they're sitting in Montecito in that massive house, realizing that maybe, just maybe, they made a catastrophic miscalculation. Let me tell you what I think this is really about. It's not about family. It's not about reconciliation. It's about survival, financial survival, reputational survival, because without the royal connection, what are they? He's a spare prince with no role. She's a former actress with a failed podcast and a failed lifestyle brand. Together, they're a cautionary tale about what happens when you mistake fame for substance. And now they want to come back. They want the UK to give them a second chance. They want the family to forgive. They want the public to forget. But here's what they don't understand. You can't have it both ways. You can't trash the institution for years, profit off that criticism, build your entire brand around being victims of that institution, and then expect to waltz back in when it's convenient for you. That's not how this works. The royal family is many things, but it's not a revolving door. You don't get to leave, take your titles with you, use those titles to enrich yourself, attack the family in public, and then come back when your American adventure falls apart. And let's be honest about what this return would really mean. It would mean they were wrong about everything. It would mean the institution they criticized, the family they accused, the country they abandoned was actually better than the alternative they chose. It would mean they failed. And I don't think they're ready to admit that. Not publicly. Which is why this whole plan is being done so quietly. No big announcements, no press releases, just quiet conversations, backroom negotiations, feeling out the temperature, seeing if there's any opening at all. But from what we're hearing, there isn't. The family has moved on. William is focused on his own role, his own future. Charles is focused on his reign, his legacy. And neither of them has any interest in relitigating the past or giving Harry and Meghan a platform to cause more drama. So what happens next? Well, if these documents are accurate, and we have every reason to believe they are, we're going to see a very carefully orchestrated campaign over the coming months. Softening language, positive stories planted in friendly outlets, perhaps a charitable initiative launched from the UK, small steps, testing the waters. But I'll tell you what I think happens. I think the British public sees right through it. I think the media, which has been burnt by them before, remains sceptical. And I think the royal family, scarred by years of betrayals and public attacks, keeps them at arm's length. Because here's the bottom line. You can't undo what's been done. You can't unsay what's been said. And you can't rebuild trust with people you've spent years tearing down. Harry and Meghan made their choice. They chose fame over family. They chose money over duty. They chose California over the crown, and now they're learning what millions of people could have told them from the start: the grass isn't always greener. And sometimes when you burn a bridge, you can't rebuild it. This isn't about one document. It's not about one email or one photograph or one conversation. This is about a pattern of behavior, a pattern of choices, and a pattern of consequences. They wanted independence. They got it. They wanted freedom. They have it. But what they're realizing now is that independence and freedom come with a cost, and that cost is relevance. You have to ask yourself why. Why now? Why, after everything they've said and done, would they want to come back? The answer is obvious. Because America is done with them. Because the deals are drying up, because the money isn't what they thought it would be, because they're becoming irrelevant. And the saddest part, they had everything. They were the most popular members of the royal family after the Queen. They had global fame, they had respect, they had a role, and they threw it all away because they thought they could do better on their own. They were wrong. Now we'll see if the UK is willing to give them another chance. My guess? They're not. And frankly, why should they? Harry and Meghan made their bed. Now they have to lie in it. And if that bed is in Montecito, surrounded by people who no longer return their calls, well, that's the consequence of their choices. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, share this, and stay alert, because this story is far from over. Don't let anyone tell you this doesn't matter, because it does. This is about accountability. This is about consequences. And this is about two people who are finally realizing that actions have outcomes. And sometimes those outcomes are exactly what you deserve.